2 dead in the Los Angeles wildfires as the crisis there deepens. More than 30,000 people have fled their homes with hurricane-force winds fanning the flames. Thousands of buildings have been destroyed and new fires are springing up across the region. Emergency services say they are being pushed beyond their limits.
We have over 2,000 acres burning at this time, and the fire continues to grow with 0% containment.
Well, some of California's wealthiest and most desirable areas have been devastated by the wildfires, which fire chiefs admit are likely to get worse unless the wind drops. We have the latest from LA. Also tonight. Conflict in the Commons. The PM faces fresh calls for a national inquiry into grooming gangs after a clash with the Conservative leader. Who killed Kellyanne Bacassa? The murder hunt continues after the 14-year-old was stabbed to death on a London bus. A military milestone, 25 years after the end of the ban on gay men and women in the armed forces. We meet those who hid their sexuality, fearing isolation, imprisonment, or worse.
I was so angry about it all, and I thought somebody would intervene and squash it, and they didn't.
And don't ditch that morning coffee. Why a cup early in the day could do you good.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. Large areas of Los Angeles are engulfed in flames tonight as huge wildfires continue to rip through the Californian city's suburban neighbourhoods. Tens of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes with the fires raging across the region, driven by unusually strong winds. Houses, schools and businesses are being burnt to the ground. Some of the city's most exclusive areas, home to a number of Hollywood stars, have been hit. And there is no sign yet of a let-up in the exceptionally dry and windy conditions fueling the firestorm. In fact, city officials are warning the worst is yet to come. Well, evacuation orders are still being expanded as fire crews battle to stop the wildfires spreading yet further. At the moment, more than 1,000 firefighters are trying to contain the flames in the LA suburb of Palisades. It's already burnt more than 5,000 acres and has destroyed an estimated 1,000 structures. The fire in Eaton has claimed 2 lives and injured a significant number of people. While in Hearst, more than 500 acres have been destroyed. And remember, city officials say with more strong winds expected in the coming hours, the fires could even worsen. Well, Mary Bell Gonzalez, the CNN correspondent, is in one of the worst hit areas of the city, and I spoke to her just a short while ago.
The situation is just getting more and more worrisome here in Palisades and also across Los Angeles County. In the area, there's now been 4 fires reported. None of those fires have been contained, and we know that firefighters are working around the clock here in this parking lot where we are. There are dozens and dozens of crews on standby ready to deploy wherever they are needed.
Mary Bell, we can hear, I think, very clearly the wind where you are, and we understand that nothing is going to change until that wind declines. Do you have any news on that?
That is the biggest concern right now, and that is why we've seen so many different fires erupting across the county, is because of those unusually strong winds. I mean, they're so powerful. We've had to brace a few times while being out here because we were afraid of falling, as well as our equipment, just going and flying off. Those winds carry the embers, and those are the embers that, can spark new fires elsewhere. So those winds, they're not letting up. They haven't all morning long. There's just no update until when we can expect those to end.
And we understand that one of the fire chiefs certainly has said these fires are effectively out of control. There is nothing they can do.
Yeah, that's devastating to hear, and especially because tens of thousands of people have left their homes. They have been evacuated from their homes to get to safety, and we know that number has only been increasing as the morning has been going, and hundreds of thousands of others are also dealing with power outages, not just in these areas, but even miles away from here.
Maribel Gonzalez in LA there, thank you. Well, with the latest on these devastating fires, here's our US correspondent, Dan Rivers.
Fanned by 80-mile-an-hour winds, suburbs like Altadena were facing an inferno last night. More than 1,000 firefighters are battling the flames, which have consumed hundreds of homes. Embers are being blown more than a mile by the strong Santa Ana winds coming down from the surrounding hills.
Yeah, let's get out of here.
Many left it to the very last minute to flee, escaping with nothing more than the clothes they were wearing, emerging to find trees on fire as entire neighborhoods were surrounded by flames.
Y'all get out of here.
You're gonna be okay, all right? You're gonna be okay.
Others decided to stay put and face a living nightmare, unsure if they or their homes would survive.
We have well over 5,000 acres that have burned, and the fire is growing. We have no percentage of containment.
In Pasadena, a nursing home had to be evacuated, 95 frail residents taken out just in time.
A lot of these people are terrified, and they don't have a blanket, they don't have a wrap, they have nothing.
They'll be okay.
I know.
On Sunset Boulevard, diggers were being used to clear dozens of cars abandoned by their owners as the fire approached. In Pacific Palisades, home to numerous celebrities, actor Steve Guttenberg alluded to the chaos unfolding on some of California's most exclusive streets.
Here on Palisades Drive, if anybody has a car and they leave their car, leave the keys in the car so that we can move your car so that these fire trucks can get up Palisades Drive.
Standing in my driveway getting ready to evacuate.
Hollywood actor James Woods posted this video as his home was engulfed.
We've got a lot of planes going over, dropping water, but
One day you're swimming in the pool, and the next day it's all gone. I'm sorry. I'm usually. I thought I would be stronger than this. I thought I'd be stronger than this, but you know.
In places where the fire has already blown through, there is total destruction.
This is, oh my God. What? I've never, look at this. Beyond comprehension.
Scientists say winter rains never arrived this year and have left the hills around the city bone dry. Multiple fires on a scale difficult to grasp. It looks like the scene from a Hollywood disaster movie, but this is all too real and threatening the heart of America's film industry. The apocalyptic sunrise over Los Angeles this morning, a reminder this is far from over. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
Really jaw-dropping pictures from Los Angeles there. And you may remember earlier this week we were reporting on the extreme winter weather affecting other parts of the States with record freezing temperatures there. Well, what's happening in LA could hardly obviously be more different, yet both could be seen, many say, as consequences of climate change. So let's talk to Alex about this. What is going on, Alex?
Well, absolutely devastating scenes, as we can see there. And the wildfires, they continue to rage across the suburbs of Los Angeles, leaving authorities struggling to bring the fires under control and praying for a change in the weather forecast as the locally named Santa Ana winds drive the fires out of control. Now, California is, does fall victim to wildfires quite often because of the climate, even in winter, like today, the landscape and the raging Santa Ana winds, which shoot up the eastern side of the Santa Monica Mountains, rush down the western side, much drier and warmer. They move in the opposite direction to onshore winds, which naturally carry more moisture off the sea. So this creates a very dry environment for wildfires to spread. Now, wildfires require three components known as the fire triangle: a heat source, fuel and oxygen. Heat sources such as the sun, a bolt of lightning or a single match for a campfire can supply enough heat to spark a fire. That spark turns into flames when the fuel or any flammable material is present, like dry, dead grasses, leaves, trees, or even living vegetation known as green fuels that can also contain flammable oils that can burn when exposed to heat. As the fuels burn, the resulting flames feed and thrive off oxygen in the atmosphere. Wildfires occur outside where there is naturally an endless supply of oxygen and the winds allow the flames to spread. And in the warm and dry Santa Ana winds, well, you've only got to add in the oxygen and then you've got the perfect vehicle to drive a wildfire completely out of control. Whilst changes in climate are certainly a factor in the ferocity of wildfires, most are started by people.
OK, Alex, thank you. Well, back here, and tonight's vote, forced by Conservatives on a national inquiry into grooming gangs, was always likely to be doomed to failure, but it did lead to angry exchanges at Prime Minister's questions earlier today. Sir Keir Starmer accused the Tories of shameless opportunism and mudslinging. Kemi Badenoch said refusing to back the vote would fuel concerns of a cover-up. We'll get more from our political correspondent now, Harry Horton.
Are you going to change your mind on an inquiry, Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister met some survivors of grooming gangs this morning, but at a heated PMQs showed no sign of changing his mind on a new inquiry into the abuse scandal.
Why won't he listen to victims and launch a national inquiry which would have the power to summon witnesses and make them give evidence under oath?
Not once in 8 years did she stand here and say what she's just said. Not once in 8 years. They want a national inquiry. We had a national inquiry, the J inquiry, the J report. 20 recommendations, not a single one implemented.
The government says some measures aimed at protecting vulnerable children are included in its Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill being debated this afternoon. But the Conservatives will force MPs to vote on an amendment calling for a national inquiry into grooming gangs. If passed, it would derail the entire bill. The fury of the Education Secretary clearly evident.
I want to be very clear about the conduct of politicians, be they on the benches opposite or anywhere else, who put the pursuit of headlines today above the safety of children tomorrow. It is sickening and it is shameful.
Outside Westminster, Elon Musk continued his whirlwind of posts about grooming gangs and even encouraged Brits to phone their MP. His former favourite British politician claimed there was overwhelming support for a new inquiry.
I beg those on the other side of the House to think, don't you believe that your constituents need to know the truth about this great evil that has happened in our country?
The Conservative leadership and Reform MPs marching to the beat of Elon Musk's drum are plainly weaponising the pain and the trauma of victims for their own political ends.
The government has the numbers to pass its bill, but after a day of so much noise in Parliament and online, abuse victims may well be wondering if their interests have been advanced at all. Harry Horton, ITV News.
Well, our political editor Robert Peston is with me. Now, Robert, this amendment isn't going to pass, is it? But how much pressure does it actually put on the Prime Minister?
So, as Harry said, the Prime Minister doesn't want this new national inquiry specifically into the appalling sexual exploitation of vulnerable young women by men of Pakistani origin. But I was very struck in the House of Commons. He didn't say no, nay, never. He simply said that some of the victims had made it clear to him that they just wanted the government to get on and implement reforms that have already been recommended by the last national inquiry. But he also accepted, which I thought was quite striking, that there were some victims who did want this inquiry. He's also under pressure, let's be clear, from his own side. I was very struck that a very distinguished senior Labour MP, Sarah Champion, who's campaigned extensively on these issues, said to the Prime Minister, get on and implement those recommendations I've just referred to from the Alexis J inquiry. There are 20 of them. the recommendations were made 2 years ago. They would go an enormously long way to protect vulnerable young people. None of them have been implemented. Yes, we got the Home Secretary on Monday talking about a couple that will come into force. They are important. But, for example, that inquiry says there should be a minister, a bit like the Veterans Minister, with exclusive responsibility for these kinds of atrocities. There isn't such a minister. There should be new agencies for England and Wales who would bring together all the information and protect young people. Again, no sign of those agencies being set up. So, yes, he is under pressure, both from left and right.
Robert Peston, thank you. A murder hunt is still underway tonight after a 14-year-old boy was stabbed to death on a London bus. Kellyan Bakassa, an aspiring rapper, was attacked and killed yesterday afternoon. Online tributes have shown him in a rap video apparently filmed in an underground car park. Olivia Guthrie reports.
Kellyan Bakassa's school say he was a funny, kind and ambitious young man.
She's telling me stick to the music.
An aspiring rapper, Kellyan's life was cut short yesterday, stabbed to death on a bus in southeast London. Detectives say they're working at pace to try to track down his killer. Locals reeling from another fatal stabbing of a young teenager.
A young boy being stabbed, everything that's going on in the capital, it's disgusting really. I don't know if anyone can even do anything about it. It's gotten to that point. What can you do about it?
Emergency services were called here just before 2:30 yesterday afternoon. Paramedics and air ambulance fought to try to save Kellyan's life, but the young teenager tragically died at the scene.
Every single knife crime incident is one too many. So we need to stamp it out. We need to work with our social services. We need to continue to work with the Mayor of London to make sure we stamp it out. It's far too many. We don't want to see anyone losing their life from knife crime.
ITV News saw police retrieve a large knife from a street today, just round the corner from where Kellyan was attacked. Officers also made an arrest. It's not yet clear, though, if this was in any way related to Kellyan's killing. It follows another fatal stabbing in this area 3 months ago. 15-year-old Dejon Campbell was killed with a zombie knife in September, 2 days before a nationwide ban on the weapons came into effect. A total of 11 teenage boys were killed in the capital last year. Dejon's mother has called for such senseless violence to stop. A vigil for Kellyan is being held here in Woolwich tonight as a manhunt continues to try and find those responsible for his death. Olivia Guthrie, ITV News. Well, dozens of people have gathered at St Mary Magdalene Church here in Woolwich, a place just across the road from where Kellyan was killed yesterday, to remember the 14-year-old boy whose mother says was kind and caring and whose school says was working incredibly hard to build on the foundation successes he'd already achieved to try to turn his life around before it was so tragically cut short.
Olivia Guthrie in Woolwich, thank you. Well, there is plenty more still to come in the ITV Evening News, including...
We were all in disgrace. It took a long time to come to terms with what had happened.
The lasting suffering of those banned from serving in the military because of their sexuality. A body is found in the search for 2 British hikers in the Dolomites. And we get the latest from inside one of the hospitals crippled by soaring demand this week. We'll have those stories and more after the break. See you then. Welcome back. ITV News is tonight reporting from inside one of the hospitals in England that has declared a critical incident, prompted by services being severely disrupted by factors like high levels of illness or severe weather. Now, around 20 hospital trusts in England have declared a critical incident as cases of flu and other seasonal illnesses surge. Our health correspondent Rebecca Barry reports.
This is what it's like inside a hospital that's declared a critical incident. There are 400 beds here at Basingstoke Hospital, every one is full. So Susan, who's waiting to be discharged, has to sit here in a specially created discharge lounge rather than take up a valuable bed. She came into A&E on Monday.
I couldn't believe it. I've never seen anything quite like it. It was horrendous. Just people everywhere. Nobody knew what they were doing. A few people were getting angry.
The NHS Trust here in Hampshire, one of many across England, forced to take action to keep patients safe as they face huge demand fuelled by a rise in flu cases and other winter viruses.
We're having quite a high number of patients waiting for our care at the moment.
Here, that means postponing non-urgent operations.
So what we're doing is we're making more capacity so we can treat as many patients as we can.
They've also repurposed this surgical ward so it can take in patients from the emergency department. Wendy has been in over Christmas, recovering from cancer surgery.
They're very, very busy, and as I say, the nurses especially just seem to be running all over the place.
Across the UK, services are stretched. Here in Northern Ireland, the early start to the flu season, adding pressure to the health system.
Unfortunately, we work in extreme and challenging pressures all year round. This has been compounded by the increase in respiratory infections over the last number of weeks. The demand for our services outweighs the capacity that we have in our hospitals.
In England over Christmas and New Year, there were 5,000 patients a day in hospital with flu. But health bosses fear the peak could be yet to come.
There's two worries at the moment. One is around the social mixing and whether we're going to see further rises in flu cases, which is a possibility. We've also got a cold period coming in, and we know that both cold and viruses increase the pressure on emergency departments.
People are being told to only call 999 or go to A&E if they have a life-threatening emergency. Rebecca Barry, ITV News. Alpine Rescue Services, searching for two missing British hikers, confirmed tonight that they have found a body. Nothing had been heard from the two men since they set out on their trek in the Italian Dolomites on New Year's Day. Rescuers say the body was found buried under snow. John Ray reports.
Happy New Year. Woken up to some delightful sunshine.
The video is little more than a minute long. A memento of a New Year adventure high in the mountains.
I want to attack this today.
Mountains that have claimed at least one life. The body of Sam Harris was found today, buried in the snow. His friend, Aziz Ziriat, is still missing.
Yeah, looking forward to a day scampering. We're not taking our packs today.
These pictures sent to family by Aziz on New Year's Day are the last record of the two men alive. From this hut, they set out to conquer another summit.
Quality little setup.
Rescuers say they followed the signal of one of their phones to find the other hiker's body.
We had the path of the phone of one of the guys that goes until a steep place of rocks that is over the place where we found Samuel.
The rescue operation was initially hampered by poor weather on the peaks. The two men had many years' experience, but the alarm wasn't raised until they failed to make their flight home.
Every weekend for years I would have seen Aziz, and most weekends seen Sam. We've been really hopeful for the outcome that we wanted, so yeah, it's going to take some time to sink in, but yeah, absolutely devastated.
It's a bit icy and I'm only wearing my flip-flops.
For all the jokes, they were well prepared. Whatever misfortune befell them, bad weather or simply bad luck, remains a mystery. John Ray, ITV News.
Some other news now in UK athletics. One of its former senior officials have been charged with manslaughter over the death of Paralympian Abdullah Hayyi in 2017. The 36-year-old from the United Arab Emirates died after a metal cage fell on him during a training session at a leisure centre in East London. The car of the former England rugby player Tom Voice was found in 7 feet of water after it was swept away during Storm Dara in Northumberland last month. An inquest into the death of the 43-year-old revealed that his body had been found further downstream 4 days later after he tried to cross a swollen ford. And US politicians who served across the political spectrum during Jimmy Carter's presidency have paid their respects to the former president. The body of the 39th president is lying in state for a second day ahead of a state funeral tomorrow after he died at the age of 100. Now, on what is one of the busiest times of booking holidays, there is concern tonight about a raft of new travel rules. From now on, anyone visiting the UK from outside the EU without a visa or legal residence rights will need a digital permit. In April, that requirement will extend to European visitors too, and the EU is likely to introduce a similar measure. Here's our consumer editor, Chris Choi.
There's nothing like cold weather to get you thinking about your next holiday. But things are changing, and this travel agent in Manchester is spreading the word.
The ETIAS system will come in.
Millions of UK holidaymakers going to Europe will need new travel permits. They're cheap enough, but there's potential for misunderstandings.
It's not really much info, so people are confused and possibly a little concerned, but I don't think they need to be.
It's now expected that 2025 will transform international travel rules. If you're going to any of 30 European countries, including France, Spain, Portugal and Greece, you could be affected. New travel permits called ETIAS are being brought in, standing for European Travel Information and Authorisation System. The start date has yet to be confirmed, but it's expected later this year after the summer peak. The new permits will cost €7 per adult, valid for 3 years. But other changes for travellers coming to the UK started today. These at Perth Airport in Australia are heading to Britain, some unaware of the new requirement that visitors from outside Europe now need an electronic travel authorisation.
I asked my daughter and the agency who do the tour for us, he said we don't need before. She said, but it's open today, so I don't know what to do.
Those promoting Britain as a travel destination are worried the new requirements could make the UK seem less welcoming. And what's worrying industry leaders is that starting in April, visitors from Europe will also need the new permits to come here. You're representing the hospitality sector. Are your fears that this will make the UK less hospitable?
We're concerned that lots of tourists don't know that they need it, so that while we're trying to show that we're welcome, we're open for business, we want to increase our inbound tourism numbers, that people will be deterred because they won't know that they've got to have this extra permission.
The travel rule changes improve security and efficiency, says the government, but in time it adds a new layer of planning for much cherished getaways.
So where do you fancy this year?
Chris Choi, ITV News.
Italy looks good. And for more information, there are more details on those new travel requirements on our website, itv.com/news. You are indeed watching the ITV Evening News. It's a little bit after 7 o'clock, and here's what's still ahead. What's being done to help parents of school children with crippling living costs? A new golf league tees off without a buggy in sight.
Where would you rather play? If you could go and play somewhere indoors, that would be amazing.
Sounds a bit wimpy to me.
It's much nicer getting out in the fresh air.
Yeah.
Why timing is everything if you want to get a health kick out of your coffee.
And amber and yellow weather warnings have been issued by the Met Office for snow and ice as the cold weather continues. I'll have more details in the national forecast that's coming up later in the programme.
Well, all of that is still to come on the programme. But first, this month will mark a major milestone in the history of Britain's armed forces. In just a few days' time, it'll be the 25th anniversary of the ban being lifted on gay people serving in the UK's armed forces. The ban caused widespread suffering, with thousands of service personnel forced to lead a life of secrecy, risking interrogation, surveillance, court-martial, dismissal, or even, in some cases, imprisonment. Now, many of the troops who suffered under the ban still bear the mental scars of the ordeals they were put through. A commemorative comic book was released today in which some of their stories are told. Martha Fairley reports.
We were all in disgrace. So we all felt ashamed, and it took a long time to come to terms with what had happened and to face it. Years and years and years and years for me.
Steve Purvis was thrown out of the RAF in 1985 for having a relationship with another man.
They court-martialed me, dismissed me with disgrace, reduced me to the ranks, took away all my financial benefits, and sent me to HMP Gloucester. And it all seemed surreal. I was so angry about it all because I didn't feel it should be happening, and I thought somebody would intervene and squash it, and they didn't.
Former fighter jet pilot Flight Lieutenant Caroline Page was grounded when she revealed she was transgender.
I had this brilliant job, but I was missing my life and I needed to do something about it. I would go to work and be the person that everybody expected me to do and doing this Top Gun amazing job, but I'd go home, lock the doors, close the curtains, and then I would relax and just be myself, be Caroline. The ban was still in place, and all of the opinions were against me being in service. And they said I was a danger and a liability. And it wasn't for a short while until people started standing up for me and saying, hang on a minute, Caroline's not the one with the problem, you are. And when the first voices said that, then more joined in, and I got to believe in myself that I could have a career in the Air Force. And people started realising it wasn't about me being transgender, it was about me being able to do the job. And as long as I could do the job, that was all that mattered, really.
While homosexuality was decriminalised in 1967, the Ministry of Defence only lifted its so-called gay ban on service personnel in 2000. Over the years, hundreds of armed forces personnel faced prejudice, persecution, interrogation, and in some cases a criminal record because of their sexuality.
There we
That's
go.
me. I think that's me.
Yeah, it's a wonderful one of you.
Yeah, I look a lot more glamorous.
On a ball.
Now Caroline and Steve's stories are being told through illustrations, commissioned for the latest edition of Coming Home, a comic that shares the mental health stories of armed forces veterans. The comic stories resonate with Olympian and former Army Sergeant Dame Kelly Holmes, who, despite being made an honorary Army Colonel, lived in fear of coming out for decades.
When I was 23, I had a raid. So what happened was the Royal Military Police came into our barracks. I hadn't long got promoted to a corporal, and I was fearful of what that might mean if they found out about me. And to be honest, that led me to lead 30 odd years of trauma, fear. I then got to know other people and other veterans that had been through situations where it was very traumatic for their life, and I didn't get the brunt of any of the really bad, vile humiliation that some did. But because I went on to have a really fruitful career and some didn't, I almost felt like survivor's guilt. It just feels like I've gone and had a wonderful career and they haven't.
For Steve and Caroline, making the comic has helped process some of what happened to them and let others understand too.
I have given to sort of family and friends copies to mull over, really, because you want to have some sort of reaction.
Has that been useful to be able to say, here you go, read this?
Yeah, it has. It has, because you then don't have to explain warts and all what happened to you. You say, okay, well, have a read. I'm the third story in there. Have a quick read, and then you'll know where I'm coming from and what I'm about. And yeah, I'm very proud of that.
Steve Purvis there, ending that report from Martha Fairley. OK, let's get an update on what's making the news tonight. 2 people have died and a number have been left with significant injuries as fires continue to spread in California. Tens of thousands of residents have been evacuated and a state of emergency has been declared in Los Angeles. More than 1,000 firefighters have been deployed, but tornado-like winds have prevented crews from bringing those blazes under control. Here, MPs are voting right now on the Conservatives' amendment that would bring about a national inquiry into grooming gangs. The vote is not expected to pass. The government say it would prevent the welfare bill helping those who need it immediately. And a teenager who was stabbed to death on a London bus has been named as Kellyanne Bokassa. The 14-year-old was attacked near Woolwich around 2:30 yesterday afternoon. No arrests have so far been made. Another dismal set of financial figures today made for a decidedly gloomy start to 2025 for the British economy. Britain's borrowing costs, by which we mean the cost of servicing government debts, jumped to their highest level for almost 17 years. Our economics editor, Joel Hills, is outside the Treasury for us. Not good news for the Chancellor then, Joel?
Definitely not. The government plans to borrow an extra £100 billion during the course of this financial year, Mary, to plug the gap between what it is spending and what it raises in tax. And the cost of doing that has just shot up. 4.8%. That is the effective interest rate that international investors charge the British government to borrow money over a 10-year period. What's called the yield on bonds issued by the government rose after Labour won the election last July, as you can see here, and it rose further since the Chancellor's budget last October. Bond yields are now back to levels last seen during the financial crisis. The UK, though, is not alone. Investors have been offloading government debt in the United States, in France, in Germany, in Italy. The sell-off actually began early in December, but it has intensified in the last few days. And this is happening because the market view is that inflation and therefore interest rates across advanced economies are likely to remain higher for longer, not least because the next President of the United States was elected on the promise of sweeping tariffs, the mass deportation of migrants and big tax cuts. Now, this matters very much because when government's borrowing costs rise, then mortgage rates tend to rise too. And this could be a big headache for the Chancellor, who's promised to balance the books.
If bond yields remain at this level, it means that the Chancellor will have to stand up in the Commons on the 26th of March and either admit she's broken her own fiscal rules or announce policies that will trim government spending or increase taxes.
Tonight, in a statement, a Treasury spokesman told us no one should be any doubt that meeting the fiscal rules is non-negotiable. The Chancellor has said previously she won't be increasing taxes or borrowing again, which means if something's got to give, it's likely to be spending on public services.
OK, Joel Hills outside the Treasury. Thank you. Cost of living factors facing parents of school-aged children, like branded uniforms and kits, were being considered by MPs today. It's another key part of the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which was being debated in the Commons. Stacey Foster reports.
For these pupils, the school day starts at 8 a.m. with a bagel. Some parents pay £3 to drop their children off early, but many get Breakfast Club for free.
I got on my scooter to Kim's school and I came here to get some breakfast.
What did you have for breakfast this morning?
2 bagels. My mum drops me off and then she can go to work.
The school says this provision is helping to get attendance rates up, which have fallen since the pandemic, but they can't afford to feed every pupil.
The school makes a loss of anything between £5,500 and £6,000, which each breakfast club or after school club, it's potentially a classroom assistant.
I beg to move that the bill now be read a second time.
The Children and Schools Bill has had its second reading in Parliament. The government says the new law will protect children from harm but also help struggling families. The new bill will give every primary school pupil access to a breakfast club, saving parents around £450 a year. It will also introduce a cap on the number of branded items that pupils need as part of their uniform, saving parents £50. But it also includes protections for those not in school, including a register of all home-educated children. Critics say this legislation doesn't go far enough.
I have nothing against breakfast clubs, but the problem is that it
We don't know whether people will be getting a hot meal at the start of the day. Probably not. It might just be a piece of toast or a bowl of cereal or a piece of fruit.
And schools are concerned about where the money will come from to fund the ambitious plans.
There's lots of things that they're wanting us to do, and it'll be interesting to see how they're thinking that we're going to be able to fund it.
There's no doubt the rising costs of everything has put pressure on families, and there are increasing demands on schools to deliver the solutions from within already stretched budgets. Stacey Foster, ITV News, Leicester.
Broadcaster Piers Morgan is to leave Rupert Murdoch's News UK to focus on his YouTube show. The former editor of the News of the World has struck a deal to buy out his uncensored brand. Morgan says he's looking to grow the channel in the US and elsewhere. And 19-year-old Archie Vaughan, son of the former England captain Michael Vaughan, is to become captain of England under-19s. The Somerset all-rounder will lead the side during their upcoming tour of South Africa. Two of the biggest names in modern golf, Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy, are helping to launch a new tournament in Florida, which could change the face of the sport. The Golf League puts top players from around the world onto a virtual golf course. And the tournament is being played using a simulator, much like those used by golf enthusiasts at home, except, as Carrie Davis reports, rather bigger.
Tonight, this is the epicenter of the game of golf as it is reimagined in a way that feels just right for 2025.
This futuristic team format takes place inside a purpose-built arena created by two of golf's biggest stars, Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy. Players begin each hole on a giant simulator, and with a TV audience in mind, they're all mic'd up.
A bit like myself, a bit chunky.
They then transition to a physical green, where the surface is fully adjustable.
Dame Laura down the hill.
Initially sceptical, one of Britain's most decorated golfers. But after watching the opening match, Dame Laura Davies wouldn't mind having a go.
I think they should have a seniors version of it and get the girls and boys all mixed up in together. That'd be fun, because I mean, it's the sort of thing you'd love to do, and you know, for what it is, I think it's off to a good start.
Have they missed a trick not including women from the start of this?
I think it would have been a really good idea to include one of the girls off the LPGA, the top players, because you know they can hold their own with these guys.
It's a far cry from traditional golf, which requires acres of land and walking a fair few miles, unless, of course, you've got one of these.
And with temperatures like today's, some can see the appeal.
If it was accessible to other people, like for us being out here today, where would you rather play? If you could go and play somewhere indoors, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Somebody like my son, you know, 20 years old, 17 years old, you know, they come up here and play on the range and they like the simulator, they like that instant feedback that you get.
But there are purists who much prefer the real deal.
Sounds a bit wimpy to me.
It's much nicer getting out in the fresh air.
Yeah.
It's the excitement of watching it over 18 holes.
Traditional golfers is the one for us, I'm afraid.
Traditional it is not, and that is the point. Those behind the TGL call it golf reimagined. The pros seem to have fun, but the viewers will decide if it has a future. Carrie Davis, ITV News.
Still to come before Emmerdale, why you will wish that you'd had your morning coffee a little bit earlier.
And an amber warning is still in place for snow across the southwest at the moment. I have more on this in the national forecast. That's coming up in a couple of minutes.
Do join me and Alex after the break. We'll see you then. And again, more weather warnings today. I don't know why I'm smiling. More cold weather to come. Tell us the worst, Alex.
More snow warnings actually in place at the moment. In fact, we've got some wintry pics to show you. Had this band of rain move up from the south, which I was talking about on last night's programme. That did happen, and this is the result. This was Lewis in Sussex a short time ago. I can tell you that we had snow at Gatwick Airport, and there's also warnings in place out towards the southwest. In fact, an amber warning, which we can take a look at right now. That does actually expire at 9 o'clock this evening. So hopefully the worst is already happened, and we should start to see things easing as we head through the next couple of hours or so. But we do have these other snow and ice warnings in place across northern parts of Scotland and also for Northern Ireland. Let's take a quick look at the warnings for tomorrow, and you can see as we move through, we lose that snow warning across the south, but the snow and ice warnings out towards the north and across the west stay very much in place. There's still some wintry weather to watch out for. As for the air mass setup, well, I'm afraid it does stay on the cold side as we head through the next few days. In fact, you are going to notice that real chill in the air as you wake up tomorrow morning. You can see the jet stream is to the south, that's still allowing that cold Arctic air to move down through the British Isles. So what does it mean for us tonight? Well, we're going to take a look at the nighttime temperatures for towns and cities in just a second, but I wanted to pull out the rural temperatures because it is going to be feeling very raw out there. Let's take a quick look at what we could expect across the north, as you can see, down to minus 13 or 14 for some sheltered glens of Scotland. So very cold indeed, icy stretches, not to mention perhaps some freezing fog as we wake up tomorrow morning. So still a little tricky on the roads if you're going to be in that morning rush hour. Let's take a look at the details right now.
Visibility may be low this evening as the cold weather hits. Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
Well, let's take a look at the pressure pattern setup as we head through the next few days, and that does show that today's front is now going to pull away eastwards, but behind it we do have this low pressure moving in, and that will arrive on Friday, bringing some outbreaks of rain, again, which could turn a little on the wintry side with that colder air mass still over much of the UK. As for this evening, well, it is going to be a very cold night indeed. We're going to see further snow flurries across the south, but as I say, that amber warning does expire at 9 o'clock this evening. Up towards the north and northwest, snow showers developing here, which is why those snow and ice warnings are in place as we head through these small hours of Thursday. But in towns and cities, it is going to be a pretty raw night, particularly away from the far southeast. We're talking about nighttime lows of around -4, -6 in towns and cities, so built-up areas, but rurally, as I just showed you, it will be even colder. So a very raw, widespread sharp frosts, icy stretches even outside of the warning area. So if you're up on the road first thing tomorrow, do go very carefully on all surfaces, actually, even on the pavements. Heading into tomorrow as we run through, it will be a quieter day. The snow activity will start to die down a little bit, and we are going to be left with a good deal of sparkly wintry sunshine, but not a great deal of heat to go with it, as you can imagine, with the current conditions. So we're looking at daytime highs tomorrow afternoon up across the north, say in Scotland, of around 1 degree. More like 4 for Northern Ireland, and a similar picture as you head further south into England and Wales. So keep wrapping up warm for now.
Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
The good news is, I think, as we head towards the end of this week, the weather warnings will start to die down. Still chilly, but something looking a little milder towards next week.
All right, we'll have to make do with that for the moment then, Alex. Thank you. Well, so it's not really much good news on the weather then, but if you like a breakfast caffeine fix, this next story might just cheer you up, because scientists now think a cup of coffee in the morning is actually beneficial to the health. But beware, the health benefits do not seem to apply if coffee is drunk later in the day. Ben Chapman explains.
It's always nice to discover that that little treat can also be good for you. But there's always a catch. Just like the caffeine hit, it turns out the health benefits of a great coffee wear off as the day goes on. Though try telling that to these afternoon aficionados in Birmingham.
When do you tend to drink coffee?
So it's usually dependent on my needs, but usually like around midday, like 12-ish, because then it means that I'm like awake throughout the afternoon.
I think you'd have to try really hard to convince me not to have my afternoon coffee or my evening coffee. It just gives me energy throughout the day.
New research has found coffee can help keep our hearts healthy, but only if it's kept to the morning. The study analysed the habits of 40,000 patients in America. It found morning coffee drinkers were 16% less likely to die within 10 years and 31% less likely to die of cardiovascular disease. But the benefits vanished in people who kept drinking it throughout the day. The study doesn't explain why, but there are theories. A cappuccino before lunch, for instance, can harness the chemicals in coffee that can reduce inflammation in the body, which is worse in the morning, whereas an espresso in the evening, surprise, surprise, can keep you awake, which your heart doesn't like. But some scientists have added a shot of scepticism, so more proof may be needed. But if this short-term pick-me-up is to have long-term benefits, we may need to put it down after lunch. Ben Chapman, ITV News, Birmingham.
And that's all for now. Tom's here at 10, but from me and all the evening team, bye-bye.